Under the pale glow of security lights, the night hummed with the low whir of an electric gate and the trembling breath of a man who had never known fear, before the CEO, Grant Whitmore, dragged himself across the wet pavement, his designer suit torn, his leg twisted. At an unnatural angle, his voice cracked. As he pleaded, "Don't hurt me. I can't walk." The shadow above him didn't move, just stared, and in that stillness the city noise faded, leaving only the sound of Grant's uneven breaths and the slow, measured steps of the man he had once called useless Marcus Reed. The words fell heavy between them, and Grant looked up into eyes that no longer trembled with desperation, but burned with calm judgment. He whispered, "Marcus, please, this isn't who you are." But Marcus said nothing, the faintest smirk crossing his face as lightning split the sky. Then the scene shattered like glass. A week earlier, sunlight spilled across rows of steel racks and humming forklifts as Marcus adjusted his safety vest and wiped sweat from his brow. The warehouse floor smelled of motor oil and cardboard, and the air buzzed with tension. The company had a new CEO, and everyone whispered about him like a storm on the horizon. Grant Whitmore was young, rich, ruthless, and determined to cut costs at any price. Marcus needed this job. His daughter Lena needed the insurance. Her therapy depended on it. When his phone buzzed, he checked the screen. A message from Lena with a smiley face drawn beside a math problem. She was proud. He smiled faintly, typing back, "Almost home, kiddo." Moments later, Grant entered the warehouse, followed by his assistant Rachel, a quiet woman with tired eyes. Grant's voice sliced through the room like cold glass as he barked numbers and orders. Without looking at the people carrying them out, he stopped at Marcus's workstation and frowned. "You're Marcus, right? The one who asked for special scheduling?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, sir, just mornings, so I can take my daughter to therapy." Grant laughed, soft and sharp. "You think this place runs on pity, son? This is a business, not a daycare." His tone made nearby workers lower their eyes. Marcus kept his voice steady. "I don't need pity, just a chance to keep doing my job right and take care of my kid." Grant tilted his head. "You sound like one of those motivational posters." Then he turned to Rachel Markham for review. When the shift ended, Marcus sat in his old sedan outside the warehouse, watching Grant's luxury car glide past. It gleamed under the sun like it had never known dirt or effort. Rachel stepped out of the building, catching Marcus's eye. For a moment, her lips moved as if to say sorry before she hurried after Grant. The next few days were worse. Grant started holding surprise audits, cutting overtime, canceling safety bonuses. He called meetings just to humiliate people. The air grew thick with fear. One afternoon, Marcus was summoned to the conference room, his palms slick with sweat. Grant waited behind a long glass table, holding a file folder. Rachel stood behind him, looking uneasy. Grant's voice was smooth, almost kind. "Marcus, we found discrepancies in your section, missing inventory and falsified reports. Care to explain?" Marcus blinked, confused. "Sir, that can't be right. I double-checked every order." Grant tossed the paper across the table. The numbers were fabricated. Marcus knew it immediately, but his protests only made Grant's smile grow thinner. Grant said, "You see, this is what happens when you hire people distracted by their personal lives, can't focus on the job." Rachel tried to speak. "Sir, maybe we should check with logistics." Grant cut her off. "No, we don't reward incompetence." He turned back to Marcus. "You're fired." The words didn't sink in at first. They just echoed in the sterile air. As Rachel avoided his gaze, Marcus gathered his things under the watch of security guards. Every step out of that building felt like a punishment. The sun burned his face. The city suddenly louder, crueler. That night, he sat in silence while Lena did homework in her wheelchair. She asked, "How was work, Dad?" He forced a smile. "Same old long day. You hungry?" She nodded, and he started cooking the cheap instant noodles they could still afford. When she wasn't looking, his hands trembled. Later, after she fell asleep, Marcus sat by her bedside, watching her chest rise and fall in rhythm with the soft hum of her ventilator. He opened his phone, scrolling through his bank account and the unpaid hospital notices. His throat tightened as he whispered to himself, "There's got to be a way." A few days later, Rachel called, her voice low, and hurried, "Meet me at the coffee shop near 8th and Main." She said, "I can't talk long, Marcus." When the next morning, she slid a flash drive across the table. Without looking at him, her hands shook. That internal documentation from corporate. She whispered, "Grant's been rerouting insurance funds to his personal accounts. It's how he covers those charity galas." Marcus's eyes widened. "You're sure?" She nodded. "I shouldn't even have this, but you didn't deserve what he did." Marcus stared at the drive like it was burning a hole through the table. "Why are you helping me?" "Because," she said, "I'm tired of watching good people lose everything." Back home, he plugged the drive into his old laptop. Files open like doors to rooms full of rotten medical reimbursements, rejected disabled workers, removed from payroll, executive bonuses, approved the same day. It was a trail of cruelty Disguised as business, Marcus leaned back, staring at the ceiling, the anger inside him solidifying into something colder, calmer. He closed the laptop, his reflection faint in the screen. Outside, thunder rolled distant and low. He looked at Lena's empty wheelchair parked by the window and whispered, "I promised." I'd fix his voice barely above the rain. He stood by the window, hands in his pockets, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. Each one, a reminder of the people living unaware of the man who decided who deserved to live well and who didn't. And for the first time, Marcus smiled, not with hope, but with clarity. He whispered to the darkness, "He took everything from us, but I'll make him remember what it feels like to lose control." His reflection stared back at him sharp and unblinking. He added softly, "Tomorrow it starts." Rain slicked the streets and turned every reflection into something uncertain. Marcus moved the night. Like a ghost, his mind a quiet storm. He spent days gathering what he could from Rachel's files, piecing together the pattern of fraud, each document, another nail in Grant Whitmore's golden coffin. But proof alone wasn't enough. Men like Grant didn't fear laws. They bought them. Marcus needed something louder, something that would break the mask Grant wore in front of the world. He spent mornings driving for deliveries to keep the lights on and nights studying Grant's every move, his interviews, his company press releases, the speeches about equality that made Marcus's stomach twist. One evening, while Lena watched videos on her tablet, she looked up and said, "Dad, everyone online loves that guy. He helps hospitals and schools." Marcus stared at the screen, Grant smiling for cameras, handing out checks like blessings, and he felt his jaw tighten. "That's the thing about people who love cameras," he said softly. "They forget the camera can love the truth too." Lena tilted her head, confused, and Marcus smiled. "Don't worry, kiddo, you'll see soon." The next day, he met Rachel in a parking garage. She wore a hoodie and kept glancing over her shoulder. He told her the documents were solid, but he needed access to something bigger. Rachel whispered the upcoming charity gala, Grant's idea, a walk for change event to raise money for disability research. "Ironic, isn't it?" Marcus said, his voice edged with dark humor. She nodded. "That gala will be broadcast live, donors, investors, reporters. If someone wanted to show who he really is." She hesitated, eyes flicking. "To Marcus, then that would be the place." Marcus spent the following week preparing, every step careful, every move invisible. He volunteered to help at community centers, his old co-workers connecting with others laid off unfairly, their stories painful and real. He recorded interviews, their faces blurred, voices changed, but truth undiluted. He built a pattern of testimony wrapped around Grant's smiling press statements. By the time the week ended, he had enough to turn Grant's reputation into ashes. Lena helped him code a small website simple. Anonymous, she laughed. We tried to understand her shortcuts. "You're like a hacker, Dad." He grinned. "Guess she even called me one for justice." She winked and said, "Then make it viral." At night, Marcus dreamed of the warehouse lights flickering and Grant's laughter echoing off steel beams. He woke sweating, but calm, anger now a tool, not a wound. He spent hours rehearsing what he'd do the day of the gala, where to stand, what to trigger. When Rachel called again, her voice trembled. "There's more. Grant's been threatening the board to keep quiet. He's untouchable." Marcus said quietly, "Nobody's untouchable, not anymore." The morning of the gala dawned clean and bright, the city buzzing with energy. Marcus stood by his cracked mirror, adjusting a borrowed suit Lena wheeled in, and smiled. "Dad, you look like you belong in those fancy buildings again." He laughed low and touched her shoulder. "Maybe I finally do." She handed him a tiny pin, a piece of her robotics project. "Press it when you're ready," she said, proud of her creation. He slipped it onto his lapel like armor. At the event, the ballroom glowed with gold light chandeliers hanging like captured stars, cameras everywhere, guests in polished smiles. Grant stood at the center, shaking hands, the crowd laughing. His effortless charm, Marcus moved quietly through the volunteers, adjusting cables, pretending to check microphones. His heart steady. Rachel caught his eye across the room. She gave the smallest nod to signal. He stepped into control booth where technicians monitored screens. One leaned back, complaining about the boring speech schedule. Marcus smiled politely. Then, when no one looked, slipped a flash drive into the main system. The monitors blinked once, then stabilized. Nobody noticed. He walked out, blending back into the crowd. Grant's speech began smooth, rehearsed, dripping with practiced empathy. He spoke of hard work, of giving everyone a chance of walking together toward a better world. Marcus stood near the back, listening, every lie cutting deeper. Grant's hand gestures confident, his grin flawless. Then Marcus pressed the pin Lena had given him. At first, it was subtle. The background screens flickered and shifted from Grant's slideshow to raw footage. The crowd murmured. Grant turned confusion. Flickering, the first clip showed him shouting in the warehouse, his voice cruel and sharp, calling workers worthless. The next clip revealed emails and signatures of embezzlement files. Rachel had risked everything to send reporters gas phones, lifted recording every second. Grant froze and laughed nervously, saying this is a mistake, some deepfake trick, but his voice cracked. Rachel stepped forward from backstage, her face pale but fierce. She said, "No tricks, Grant. Every signature, every recording verified. I kept copies because I knew this day would come." The room erupted. Investors stormed out. Journalists shouted questions. Grant tried to grab the microphone, shouting for security, but nobody moved. Marcus stepped forward, calm, eyes steady. He said softly, "You built this stage, Grant. Now stand on it." Grant's gaze darted to Marcus, rage and panic mixing you. He hissed, "You think you can ruin me?" Marcus said, "I didn't have to. You did that all by yourself." The words echoed across the stunned silence. Before chaos began, cameras flashing, reporters pushing forward. Grant stumbled off stage, trying to escape, but slipped on a cable, his ankle twisting. He fell with a cry of pain, clutching his leg, his voice desperate. "Don't hurt me. I can't walk." The irony hung heavy over the room. Marcus looked down at him the same way Grant once looked at him in that conference room, only this time Marcus's eyes held no fear, just quiet finality. He whispered, "Now you understand what power feels like when it's gone." Security approached. Rachel nodded toward the exit. Marcus turned without another word, leaving the sound of collapsing applause behind him. Outside, the night air was cool, clean, free. He pulled out his phone notifications, exploding his anonymous site, trending under the tag Truth Walks. He smiled faintly and whispered to himself she'd be proud. When he reached home, Lena was awake, waiting, her eyes bright. "I saw the stream, Dad. Everyone's talking about it." He sat beside her, brushing her hair back, the faint hum of her machines filling the space. She said, "What happens now?" He took her hand and said, "Now we let the world walk for change for real." The lights outside flickered like stars, and Marcus knew the story wasn't over yet. The storm had broken, but the dawn was just beginning. The city woke to headlines that burned through every screen. Former CEO Grant Whitmore exposed in viral scandal, corporate fraud, discrimination, and stolen medical funds. Uncovered overnight, his name became a symbol of hypocrisy. The empire he built crumbling in hours. While Marcus watched from his kitchen, the morning sunlight soft against his tired face, Lena sat beside her laptop, open, scrolling through news feeds, her eyes wide. "Dad, they're all talking about you," she whispered, her voice full of wonder. He smiled faintly. "Not about me, kid, about the truth." Across town, Grant hid inside his penthouse, curtains drawn, phone buzzing nonstop. His lawyers calling, investors flee, his board resigning, his empire dissolving with every post. He threw his phone against the wall, the screen cracking like his composure. He shouted to no one, "This can't be happening." But the echo answered anyway. Rachel's interview streamed live. She spoke calmly, detailing years of cover-ups and threats. Reporters dissected every word. Grant's reputation turning to dust. Marcus spent the day in silence, trying to steady the storm inside him. He had wanted justice, but watching another man's life collapse, even a cruel one, left a strange, hollow ache. Lena rolled her wheelchair closer, touching his hand softly. "Are you okay?" Daddy nodded, but his eyes lingered on the small scar along his palm from the warehouse years ago. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about ending the cycle of power that broke people like him. He whispered, "I'm fine. Baby, we finally did it." Evening came with a sudden knock on the door. Marcus opened it to find two officers standing outside, polite but serious. One handed him a letter. Grant Whitmore pressing charges for hacking and data theft. Marcus felt the weight of the paper like a stone. Rachel had warned this might happen. Powerful men never fell quietly. He read the words, then looked up, calm. "Tell him I'll see him in court." The officers nodded, leaving quietly. Lena watched him, her small voice trembling. "Dad, are they taking you away?" He knelt beside her. "Not today, and maybe never." Days passed, and the story grew. Grant appeared on a talk show, limping, his leg in a brace, face pale, eyes sunken. He tried to spin his fall as a misunderstanding, saying he was the victim of a smear campaign. He even forced a tear on camera, saying, "Don't hurt me. I can't walk the line." That once broke Marcus now mocked itself across the internet. Millions shared clips side by side, comparing his past cruelty with his desperate plea to memes spreading faster than his lies. Marcus couldn't help but laugh. Quietly, not cruelly, just in disbelief at how the world finally saw what it had always known. Arrogance never dies gently. Weeks later, the investigation deepened. Authorities raided Grant's offices, seizing documents. Rachel testified, fully protected under whistleblower laws, and Marcus was cleared of wrongdoing. The truth had been too public, too undeniable. Investors sued Grant for losses. The company's stock plummeted, and his penthouse was seized by the same financial officers he once commanded. With a gesture, Grant stood at the edge of his shattered empire, leaning on a cane, watching everything he owned carried out. He muttered over and over, "This isn't real." But it was, and the city that once bowed now barely remembered his name. Marcus used a small settlement to rebuild not for luxury but for life. He opened a modest repair shop, hiring workers, laid off from Grant's company, giving them fair wages, and respect. Lena helped manage the books between her therapy sessions, her smile brighter. Each day, one afternoon, she wheeled over holding a letter, a scholarship acceptance from a tech institute. She handed it to him, her eyes sparkling. "Dad, I got," and he froze and laughed, pulling her into his arms. "You did it, kid, you're unstoppable." She grinned. "Guess I had a good teacher." Later that week, Marcus stood by the window of his shop, watching customers come and go. The air smelled of coffee and engine oil, his world small, but fully thought of Grant, not with hatred, but with pity. The man who had everything but learned nothing. When his phone buzzed, it was a notification, a news alert. Grant Whitmore sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for fraud and embezzlement. Marcus read it twice, then set the phone down slowly. The justice didn't feel like revenge, it felt like balance. That evening, he and Lena took a walk to the park, the first real walk they'd had in years. She moved beside him in her wheelchair, the setting sun painting the sky in gold. She said softly, "Dad, do you think he ever understood?" Marcus looked ahead, the breeze gentle against his face. Maybe, he whispered, maybe for a moment. When he fell, he remembered what it felt like to crawl. They reached the edge of the pond, ducks gliding across the still water. Lena laughed as one splashed too close, and he joined her laughter, easy, unburdened. When they turned to head home, her hand brushed his, and she said quietly, "I'm proud of you, Dad." He smiled, "I'm proud of us." As night fell, city lights blinked awake, distant, but familiar. Marcus carried his daughter's laughter in his chest like a melody. He never wanted to forget. Somewhere a news anchor repeated Grant's final statement from court, "I can't walk." Without help, Marcus listened to the echo fading into the night and whispered more to himself than anyone, "Karma walks on 2 strong legs." The sound of Lena's soft humming filled the silence as they crossed the street together, and for the first time in a long time the world around them felt steady, alive, and fair. The past behind them, the future wide open ahead.